The Fairy type has straight up been the best competitive type in all of Pokemon since Generation 6, but how well does it actually perform in a Nuzlocke? My personal favorite Fairy type has to be Togekiss, which fortunately is one of the encounters we can get in Sword and Shield, but let me know what your favorite Fairy type is down in the comments below. As for the rules, any Pokemon that faints in this run is boxed forever. I only get to catch the first Fairy type I find in any area, no items from the bag are allowed in battle, no Dynamax for me, I always play on set mode, and I can't level past the next boss fight's highest level Pokemon before entering that fight. So join me as I attempt to beat a Pokemon Sword Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Fairy types. And my adventure begins by finding myself a Togepi in the wild area. I go ahead and capture it and name it Fuzili, but I guess the good luck of getting Serene Grace has to be countered by getting the worst possible nature. Which isn't gonna matter, right? I also head over to the Isle of Armor to pick up our second encounter of the run, a Jigglypuff. I name it Rotelli, and I keep getting these minus special attack natures! Now here's the truth, in Sword and Shield, you can have a Togekiss before even challenging Milo. But where's the challenge in that? And also, I named Togepi Fuzili just so that I could show you guys what a twisted son of a bitch he is. And in order to beat Milo with Togepi, we're gonna have to pray for the Omni boost. That's right, because of Serene Grace, Ancient Power's 10% chance to give the Omni boost actually has 20%. I also made sure to use Protect every other turn in order to get as much leftovers recovery as possible. Now I did get very lucky to get the Omni boost on the very first Ancient Power, but I actually end up getting it on the second one as well, which is insane. The plan was just to keep using Ancient Power to fish for that boost, but we ended up getting 2 before Eldegoss comes in. I start by burning off its first Dynamax turn by going for Protect to reduce the damage as much as possible. The next turn, I do have to eat a Max Overgrowth, but because of the +2 to both of my defenses, it barely does any damage at all, and I can follow it up by going for a Nasty Plot, increasing my special attack. I then go for Protect to take as little damage as possible, wasting Eldegoss's final Dynamax turn, which of course means it's gonna get its usual HP back, turning back to its original size, and with +4, I can just take it out with a couple of flamethrowers. That's right, Milo, you mess with this egg, you're the one getting fried. After the gym fight, I decide to get my Route 4 encounter I never picked up, which happens to be a Milcery. I name it Gnocchi, and the bad nature streak is still going. I also head over to the rolling fields during overcast weather where I can find myself a Ralts. And thank goodness Lasagna has a timid nature because I was starting to think I'm cursed. I immediately level it up to evolve into a Kirlia, and with enough friendship we can say goodbye to Togepi and evolve into a Togetic. And with that, it's time to take on the beautiful Nessa with her water types. I start the fight by tanking a Horn attack with Togetic just so that I can go for a Yawn and then swap out immediately into Rotelli. This does mean that I do have to eat 1 Horn attack, but it's not going to make too much of a difference since the Gordian is going to fall asleep, and at this point we can start going for Stockpile to set up my defenses as much as possible. After setting up the 3 maximum amount of stockpiles, Gordian does wake up and hit me with another Horn attack, but because of those defense boosts, it barely does anything. I continue using the strategy of Protect every other turn to get as much recovery as possible, pray to not get confused by the Water Pulse, and then take it out with a Thunderbolt. Arrokuda's next, and it hits me with a critical hit Whirlpool, after which I actually managed to hit the 55 accuracy Sing. The reason that crit is so bad is because Whirlpool actually does more damage to me than Leftovers recovers. But fortunately, Whirlpool's only active as long as Arrokuda's alive, and a couple of Thunderbolts is enough to take it out. This of course leaves the biggest threat on Nessa's team, Dynamax Dreadnought. And all of my defensive setup has been to defend myself from this guy, and I immediately get hit by a Max Geyser, which takes me down to about 60% of my remaining HP, and I do manage to pull off a clutch Sing. If I didn't hit that, I would have probably had to sack a couple Mons. After doing about 20% of its health, I decide to go for Protect to burn the last Dynamax turn in case it would wake up. After the Dreadnought returns to its normal size, I go for a Thunderbolt, taking it down below half health, after which I do go for a Protect just to burn off the final Rain turn. I do this so that I can survive a Razor Shell the next turn, which lowers my defense, which in turn activates competitive, sharply increasing my special attack so I can take out its remaining health with a Thunderbolt. Nessa, you just got served. We're going to be on fire tomorrow. Kabu, I wouldn't be that excited about getting burned at the stake. Before returning to Motostoke, we can find our next encounter, a Coughing. Now, we're not going to be able to use Rigatoni until it evolves into Wheezing, nor did we get Levitate, but things could be worse. I also head to the Brawler's Cave on the Isle of Armor to pick up an Azurill. I catch it and name it Spaghetti, and we actually got huge power, let's go! Minus attacking nature, though, of course. Then, after countless hours of running around, I can evolve it into a Marill and then an Azumarill. I also happen to pick up a Strawberry Sweet from this cafe, and after doing a bit of a twirl, Gnocchi evolves into Alcremie. And all this preparation to take on the next gym leader, Kabu, and his fire types. And he starts out by burning Fuzili, which of course doesn't matter at all since Togetic is a special attacker, and I go for Yawn just to make the process of taking this thing out a little bit easier. I use Ancient Power to fish for the boost, but this time I don't end up getting any, taking out the Ninetales, but the plan was always to leave Togetic in just in order to take that Intimidate. Spaghetti already has a minus attacking nature, so I gotta help him out as much as possible. After using Charm to lower Arcanine's attack, I decide to use a Yawn before swapping out into Spaghetti. This does mean I have to tank a Flame Wheel, but because of the Charm and it not being very effective, it barely does any damage at all, and a Waterfall the next turn is enough to just one-shot the Arcanine, leaving only Centiskorch. And the first turn, I get hit by G-Max Centiferno, which does trap me in, and I go for a Charm just to lower its attack so that I won't have to take too much damage from the next one. After tanking it, I do click Bounce just so that I'm gonna be in the air when the Centiskorch uses its next move so that I can stall out the final turn of Dynamax. There is a bit of danger here though, since I'm getting very low on health and I can't swap out because of Fire Spin. However, since Centiskorch is at -2 and I resist all his moves, I can just take it out with a Waterfall and claim my third gym badge. Now that my mission is to head over to Hammerlock, I go to the bridge field and capture myself a Cutie Fly. And Farfalle actually has an awesome timid nature. But not only that, it only takes one level up to evolve it into Rabombe. Anyway, I've got a meeting with the chairman, so I must excuse myself. Okay, somebody's a little bit self-important. I'll even spare you one of my league cards. Oh, you'll spare me one? Why is everybody so snarky in this town? Regardless, now that the level cap is higher, I can finally evolve Kirlia into a Gardevoir. I can also pick up a Moonstone in the Dusty Ball, which means Rotelli can evolve into a Wigglytuff, followed up by Coughing evolving into Wheezing. Which means we can take on Bee and her fighting types, but since both Togepi's types resists fighting, added to the facts that I get an Omni boost on my first Ancient Power, and I have Nasty Plot, let's just say it wasn't exactly a huge challenge to destroy her entire team. And someone else who didn't take much effort to destroy was Bead. Oh man, imagine if this guy started using fairy types like me. That would be cringe. On my way to Balanlea, I can pick up an Impidimp in Glimwood Tango, which I name Fettuccine. Modest nature, you gotta be kidding me. Also, it's pretty funny that Opal's favorite breakfast is cheese omelet, since her entire gym fight is just cheese. Before taking her on, though, I evolve Impidimp into Morgrem, after which it's time for the Fairy Mirror match. And for this battle, it's all about utilizing the cheese to your advantage and always starting off with Protect the first turn so that you can answer the question and get your double speed boost. From there, I started going for Calm Mind because even though Wheezing has Sludge, it's not exactly that much of a threat except if it would get a Poison. I continue stalling for turns every other turn with Protect just so that we can get the questions a little bit faster without taking damage from Sludge. Giving the paradoxical answer that Opal's favorite color is purple gives us a boost to both of our defenses, after which I continue my Calm Minding and Protecting antics until we get the final question, which of course increases both our attack and special attack by 2 stages. Now, unfortunately at this point, I did get poisoned, but we are in a situation where we can just start taking out Opal's Pokemon one by one with Psybeam and Thunderbolt. Unfortunately though, Alcremie's special defense is pretty high, and with that HP boost, it wasn't quite enough to take it out, but with the +6 special defense from the Calm Mind, we can tank the G-Max finale and the next turn take out the Alcremie with another Thunderbolt. I am now the foremost fairy trainer in all of Galar, and there's nothing you can do about it, Opal. You know, the prospect of receiving a draining kiss from Opal is traumatizing. Wait, no, you can't turn Beat into a fairy-type trainer, then there's more I need to do to prove myself. On my way to Sirchester, I find a shiny stone, which means we can say goodbye to Togetic and hello to Togekiss. I also go to the Dusty Bowl to pick up a Mawile that I named Penne Regate before it's time to challenge Gordian as rock types. Now, Gordy starts out with a Barbaracle, which I blast into oblivion by using Magical Leaf. His next Pokemon is Shuckle, so I swap out of Gardevoir into Wheezing and poison it using Toxic. Eventually, Shuckle goes down to the poison, and Gordy sends out his Stonejourner. For this one, I swap out into Azumarill and eventually one-shot it with a Waterfall. And this leaves the only Pokemon that gave me a bit of trouble on Gordy's team. I use Charm to lower its attack as he goes for a G-Max Volcalith, which is a very powerful move that also damages you over time. I then go for a quad-effective Waterfall, but because of Colossal's massive defense, it doesn't take it out and it activates its Steam engine. Because of this, I can't just use another waterfall since I'd be outsped, so I go ahead and swap into Weezing. And Weezing would have just barely survived the G-Max Volcalith and the residual damage, but I did have a Citrus Berry just in case I wouldn't. Now that Colossal's Dynamax turns are over, I swap out into Fusili, who does have to take a bit of damage from Stealth Rock and tank a Heat Crash. Because of Charm, I'm not worried about anything this thing can hit me with, even if it outspeeds, and an Aura Sphere is enough to take it out, claiming me my 6th gym badge. But I'll let you know right now that it was not the fight versus Gordy that I should have been worried about in Sirchester. You see, normally I prepare myself for these fights by doing the calcs, preparing my team, and this was no different. I start out by taking out both the Dubwool and the Pincurchin with Fusili. Hop then sends in Snorlax, and this thing is incredibly dangerous since it's got Heavy Slam. After using an Aura Sphere, it immediately takes Fusili down below half health, so I have to swap out into Rigatoni. And this right here is the first place where my plan could have gone horribly wrong, but fortunately I do outspeed after the Heavy Slam, and I can use a Will-O-Wisp, which means that the next Heavy Slam isn't gonna take me out. Luckily, I'm also not edged out by Hail, and I can swap out into Penne just to get an Intimidate off as well. The burn and the Intimidate has nerfed Snorlax pretty heavily, so at this point it shouldn't be a problem to just take it out with an Iron Head. Hop then sends in his Cinderace, and this should be very simple. I send in Spaghetti, it goes for Pyro Ball, and I shouldn't take too much damage. And the first turn, this is exactly what happens. I take about 25%, and the next turn I expect to take the same, but it gets a burn. This means my Waterfall doesn't KO, and I'm now in a range where another Pyro Ball and burn will take me out. And as you can see from the team, nothing I switch in can survive a Pyro Ball, so things ain't looking so hot. I decide that my only course of action is swapping in Penne so that I can actually get an Intimidate boost off, which means the next thing I send in is gonna survive. The Cinderace does throw by going for Mega Kick, but of course it outspeeds and takes out Penne in its very first battle. However, it is because of Mawile that we didn't lose the run right here, because we do survive with Lasagna on just 24 HP after that Pyro Ball and can take it out with a Psybeam. Unfortunately, Hop's final Pokemon is Corviknight, and we can't really swap anything into it without it dying. So unfortunately, I have to go for a Thunderbolt here and hope for the Para or the KO, but it just barely survives and takes out Gardevoir as well. Fusili can then come in for the Flamethrower Revenge KO, beating Hop, but at a huge cost. Now that our team needs some replacements, I decide to first evolve Fettuccine into Grimmsnarl. I also head over to the Stony Wilderness where I can find my next encounter, a Cottony. Luck has it that I can find a Sunstone in the Dusty Bowl, which means we can immediately evolve Cottony into Whimsicott. Which means we take on Piers, but his dark types are so easy to take on that we immediately move on to Ryhon. I start off with Fusili and Gemelli, and the plan here was pretty simple. I start off by going for Charm on the Flygon to lower its attack. This means that I can tank a pretty weak Thunder Punch and go for Yawn with Fusili to put it to sleep in the future. After Gigalith goes for Stealth Rock, the next turn I swap out of Fusili into Weezing, go for another Charm this time on the Gigalith. I then use Will-O-Wisp to have Gigalith's attack just because Rock Blast against Fusili could be really painful. I then swap in Togekiss since it is going to be my win condition and start setting up for it by continuing to go for Charm, Nasty Plot, and Protect. Once I'd alternated these moves enough time to get +6 on Togekiss, I start taking out the Flygon with a Moonblast and the Gigalith with an Aura Sphere. This, however, does not guarantee our win at all, since things could go terribly wrong since we're facing both Duraludon and Sandaconda. But I still had a few cards up my sleeve, and I start the turn by going for Protect to dodge a potential Max Steel Spike from Duraludon. I then go for a Charm to lower its attack, but it actually just goes for Max Rockfall, which is perfect since it does barely any damage at all, and the Sandaconda just misses with Glare because of Protect. The following turn, I go for another Charm to get it to -4, which means that Gemelli actually survives a Max Steel Spike on just 14 HP, and an Aura Sphere is enough to take out the Duraludon. Sandaconda could still take us out here, but it just throws by going for Glare, which gives me a free opportunity to swap out both of my Pokemon, setting me up perfectly to knock Sandaconda out with a Waterfall. Sandpit isn't going to make a difference at this point, Ryhon, and with that, we've claimed our final gym badge.
They say there are over 200 Pokemon abilities. Study them well, and you don't have to worry about being taken off guard during battles.
Dude, you know there's an ability literally called No Guard, right? Now that we have to prepare for the Champions Cup, I go to Challenge Beach to capture myself a Dedenne. It's then time to face our first opponent, Marnie, who's got Dark types. And this battle was pretty straightforward. She starts by going for Prankster Nasty Plot as I go for a Power-Up Punch. Since her only attacking move is Snarl, she goes for another Nasty Plot and I can take her out with another Power-Up Punch. The only part of the battle I actually had to prepare for is the fact that this Toxicroak has Swagger, which is easily dealt with by just equipping Grimmsnarl with a Lumberry. The rest of the fight was absolutely free, but that's what you get for using Dark types. Our second opponent during the Champions Cup is Hop, and I'm determined to do a bit better than last time we faced him. Since we've got Prankster Bulk Up, Double can barely hurt us, and the only thing that would be an issue is if it got a paralysis with Body Slam. Luckily, I equipped Fettuccine with a Cherry Berry, but unfortunately, right as we're about to take Double out, it does get a second paralysis. This doesn't end up really being an issue, however, since all of Hop's Pokemon are pretty much physical attackers, and at +6 defense, not even super effective Max Ooze from Cinderace does a thing. So we finish off the fight with a Dream Punch and get a revenge against Hop.
If you wanted to tell Challenger Hop something right now, what would it be?
Get wrecked and get good, loser. Why am I getting a sense of deja vu in this elevator? Okay, now that I think about it and these guys are here, I think I know exactly why.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Anyway, at this point, we have to deal with Macrocosmos Oleana, who of course starts out with Frostlass, so I decide to lead with Fuzili. The first turn, I get hit by a Will-O-Wisp, which doesn't matter for my special attack as I set up with a Nasty Plot, but the next turn she goes for a Hex, which of course does more damage because of that burn. My natural special attack wouldn't have been enough to take it out with a Flamethrower, but with +2, it's enough and she sends in Salazzle. It leaves me at just 11 HP with a Venoshock, and I can take it out with an Air Slash, after which I survive the burn. Her next Pokemon is Milotic, and at this point I have to switch whether I want to or not, but luckily I've got the perfect counter for Milotic, Jameli the Whimsicott. Since her only attacking move is Surf, I can easily just take her out with a couple of Giga Drains. This forces out her Serena, and not wanting to go down to an Acrobatics, I swap in Rigatoni, who takes about 30%. The next turn, I have no idea why she goes for a Trop Kick, but it lowers my attack, which doesn't matter in the end since I can just go for a Sludge Bomb, tank another Acrobatics, and finish her off with another Sludge Bomb. This leaves us with only Garbodor, which is pretty threatening for our Fairy team, and expecting a Max Quake, I would have wanted to switch in Togekiss, but since it would have died to the burn, I have to switch in Farfalle. Since literally everything on the team just dies to a G-Max Melodor at this point, I decide to go for a Charm to lower Garbodor's attack, after which it's unfortunately time for Farfalle to meet its demise. I send in Rigatoni to bait the Max Quake and swap out into a Azumarill just to waste the final turn of Dynamax. And because of that Charm that Farfalle got in before going down, it doesn't do too much damage at all. This means we only have to deal with normal Garbodor, and expecting a Gunk Shot here, it actually just goes for a Toxic Spikes instead, and I can get off a Charm to get it down to -4. The next turn it does go for Gunk Shot, almost taking me below half as I can get it down to -6 with another Charm. I then use Protect since Gunk Shot only has 5 PP, and I really don't want to go down to a crit. I then tank the 4th Gunk Shot as I go for a Liquidation, which takes Garbodor below half, activating its Weak Armor ability. Finally, I then go for another Protect to stall out the final Gunk Shot, and now that I know that it basically can't hurt Jameli at all, I decide to swap out to stall this thing out with Leech Seed. I eventually decide to just play it safe and swap out into Grimmsnarl as the Garbodor hits me with a Stomping Tantrum, then going down to Leech Seed. Oleana has such a diverse team that it's pretty common to lose a Pokemon here in a Nuzlocke. But defeating Oleana only means we have to step up and face Bede in the final Fairy Showdown. I start out by burning the Mawile to cripple its damage output and then immediately swap out into Rotelli, who gets hit pretty hard even still by an Iron Head. The plan here is to try and get off as many Charms as possible, but unfortunately I get flinched by the second Iron Head, which means Rotelli has to swap out despite not doing anything this fight. I then send in Spaghetti, who tanks the Iron Head a lot better than Rotelli and starts to fire off a few Charms to cripple the attack of this Mawile even further. Once that's done, I send in Fettuccine to start executing the master plan, using Prankster Bulk Up to get to both +6 attack and defense. I then take out the Mawile with a Thunder Punch, and not outspeeding Gardevoir and Rapidash, I have to use Sucker Punch to take them both out. I then use a +6 stab super effective Sucker Punch, and it doesn't take out the Hatterene, and it's all because I'm a modest minus attack nature, which is why Fettuccine goes down. Since Hatterene's so slow, we can come in with anything and take it out, but this just goes to show that natures really matter even in Nuzlockes, guys. And with that, we've lost our 4th Pokemon on the run, and it's time to take on Nessa once again. And I go for Protect the first turn with Ravioli just in case Golisopod wants to go for a first impression, and follow that up with a Discharge, sending it out with Emergency Exit. Expecting a Drill Run, I swap out a Ravioli into Fuzili, who of course dodges it with its flying type, and now expecting an Ice Fang, I swap out once again into Spaghetti. I'm basically fine here as long as the Barraskewda doesn't get a freeze, and my plan is to fire off 3 Charms to lower its attack to -6. I then go ahead and swap back out into Fuzili, who amazingly dodges a drill run on the switch and can start to set up its own nasty plots as I tank a few Ice Fangs. Once at +6, the carnage can begin, and we tear through all of Nessa's team using Air Slash and Magical Leaf, which I think is at least a little bit less embarrassing than getting soloed by a Jigglypuff. In reality, B is our next opponent, but I just swept her with Togekiss once again, so let's move on to Ryhon. And Ryhon is no pushover in this fight, especially since his Duraludon is super effective against us with its Steel type. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I start off by going for a Rain Dance, which means that when Torkoal goes for a Solar Beam, it charges up its Light instead, and I can just take it out with a Rain-boosted Liquidation. Goodra's next, and as long as this Thunder doesn't get a crit, we're totally fine, and I can just go ahead and take it out with a Play Rough. This means that Ryhon's next Pokemon is Flygon, and knowing that it loves to set up Sandstorm the first turn if there's different weather, I just decide to click Play Rough, and I take it out in a single hit. Next up is Turtonator, and just for the meme, since the sand is up, I decide to go for Rain Dance since I know that this Turtonator is going to go for Sunny Day, mostly just because I wanted to see 3 types of weather in a single turn. In reality, I knew I was going to outspeed and had to set up the Rain the next turn so that Fire Blast basically does no damage at all. I then go for a Liquidation as the Turtonator sets up the Sun again predictably so I can take it out with a Play Rough. This leaves Ryhon with only one Pokemon left, Gigantamax Duraludon, and knowing that a Max Steel Spike is incoming here, I swap into Rotelli, who unfortunately is gonna have to feel the full force of spikes up its rear. Now while Rotelli is gonna have to sit in the pantry forever, I go ahead and swap in Ravioli, who's gonna go for Protect to dodge the second Dynamax move of Max Rockfall. Finally, there's nothing I can do to dodge this incoming Max Steel Spike, which is a shame since Ravioli is one of my favorite types of pasta. And even though we've lost 2 of our Pokemon so far and Duraludon doesn't have his Dynamax turns left, we're still not out of the clear since Ironhead could have flinched us here and I could have missed a Will-O-Wisp, but luckily that's not the case. After inflicting the burn, I swap in Gemelli, who takes way over half from an Iron Head, but the next turn I can go for Priority Charm, which means I just barely survive the next Iron Head. Since Gemelli's almost out of health, I decide to swap out into Fuzili, tank an Iron Head, and the next turn I actually get crit by an Iron Head, which fortunately doesn't get the flinch, so I can set up a Nasty Plot and then take out the Duraludon with an Aura Sphere. This Ryhon fight is usually pretty forgiving because of the weather, but he still nailed us with those Steel Spikes. Now, even though we're supposed to face Leon in the Champions Finals at this point, we have to go up against Chairman Rose and his Steel types, which is a horrible matchup for this team. Fortunately though, most of his Pokemon are super slow and very weak to Flamethrower, which we've got on Togekiss, and after taking out Escavalier, I go ahead and tank a Wild Charge from this Klinklang and just take it out with a Flamethrower as well. I outspeed the Berserker, and as you would assume, Expert Belt Flamethrower takes it out. Now I took a huge leap of faith here, going for Nasty Plot so that I could take out the Copperajah and expecting this Ferrothorn to go for Curse, which it normally does. +2 quad effective Expert Belt Flamethrower of course destroys the Ferrothorn as Rose then sends in his final Pokemon, Copperajah. This is what I Nasty Plotted for. I click Flamethrower and wait, hold on, my Adamant Nature actually mattered? Wait a second, did I just get the burn? This burn right here allows the run to continue on, otherwise we lose Togekiss and we have no chance versus Leon. It's probably the most clutch moment in all of my Nuzlocke videos combined. After beating Rose, Hop and I go to see Dogs vs. Aliens. It's a pretty good movie. Now at this point, I decide to face Leon, and you might wonder why I do that with only 5 Pokemon on our team when there are so many more Pokemon we can catch. And the reason for that is that all my remaining encounters are either in a location where I've already caught something else, like in the case of Hatena and Modestoke Outskirts, or they require foggy weather in the wild area, which doesn't appear until after you beat Leon. So we're gonna have to do this with these 5, which is looking pretty grim. But I'm not one to back down from a challenge, especially not a difficult Nuzlocke challenge. Leon starts out the fight with his Aegislash, and I send in Fuzili, going for Protect to dodge the incoming Flash Cannon. Now, even though we dodge the attack, this means Aegislash is going to change stance, which means it's likely to go for King Shield the next turn, which is exactly what it does. This gives me a free opportunity to set up a Nasty Plot, and the next turn, I decide to just set up another as I get hit by a Flash Cannon, which hits very hard. However, now that Aegislash is in attack mode, we can easily just go for a Flamethrower, taking it out in one fell swoop. This does send in Haxorus though, and even though this thing's a Dragon type, it has both Iron Tail and Poison Jab, but it luckily misses its Iron Tail when I send in Rigatoni. This is huge since I can then survive the next Iron Tail, burn the Haxorus, and swap out into Spaghetti. In fact, that Iron Tail miss is probably about as important as the burn versus Copperajah. Spaghetti does end up getting a defense drop from the Iron Tail, and Poison Jab hits very hard and gets the poison, but I can at least take out the Haxorus with a Play Rough. Next is Dragapult, but since I want to keep Azumarill around, I decide to swap out into Nidoking. And Yoki actually tanks the Thunderbolt very well despite being level 47 and gets a Spadef boost from Maranga Berry. This boost in turn lets me survive a Shadow Ball, firing off a Dazzling Gleam to get a bit of damage off of Dragapult before it takes me out with another Shadow Ball. I then swap in Gemelli, who's got a Focus Sash, but the Flamethrower doesn't even get me down to my Sash, and I can take out the Dragapult with an incoming Moonblast. And that's pretty awesome. Since the next Pokemon on Leon's team is a Rhyperior, I can just use Giga Drain, take it down into the red, and get back all the way to full health, which means I can survive this Heat Crash with my Sash. Leon then of course goes for a full restore, but another Giga Drain takes it down as low, and the next turn, after getting all my health back, I can Giga Drain again, taking out the Rhyperior, which means we're only left with Rillaboom and Charizard. And the great thing about having Gemelli with a lot of health left here is that I've got Priority Charm on this thing with Prankster, so I can just start lowering Rillaboom's attack. It even keeps trying to use Endeavor for some reason, which I'm not sure why, but it's free charms for me, and I can then go ahead and swap out into Rigatoni, who's at least got leftovers and can get some health back. I do burn the Rillaboom here, and I'm gonna be able to take it out with Sludge Bombs, but I'm faced with the realization that Gigantamax Charizard is a huge problem for my team. And with the 4 Pokemon I have left, 3 of which are below half health, things are actually looking impossible at this point, unfortunately. But I wasn't just about to give up. I was gonna take this Charizard down as much as I possibly could before going out in bitter defeat. Charizard uses its first G-Max turn to go for Max Airstream, which boosts its speed, which I'm not too concerned about since it outspeeds my entire team anyway. And speaking of the team, this is what we currently have left, and I decided to go into Togekiss to go for Protect in order to stall out the final 2 Dynamax moves. The Protect does allow me to survive the Max Rockfall. I even survive the Sandstorm damage, and another Max Rockfall is enough to take Fuzili out, but at least now Charizard doesn't have its Gigantamax turns. Unfortunately for me though, I only have Gemelli and Spaghetti left, and despite being able to Leech Seed this thing, I only have Moonblast and Giga Drain to damage Charizard, so I get absolutely destroyed by a Fire Blast. All Leon has to do is click Air Slash, and did he actually just click Fire Blast and I survived on 20 HP, taking him out with a Liquidation? Wait a minute, hold on a second. Did I just beat a Pokemon Sword Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Fairy types? Excuse me, what?